Hello everyone, Sahili here from Classcipe Operation. Welcome to the Classcipe PD Collective event. Classcipe is a New Zealand-based company aiming to create a global community for educators and learners to share their knowledge and experiences with each other. With us, you can create your unit plan and task more easily and customize your template with accurate content recommendations. Our functions includes interactive slides, customized templates, online, offline, and hybrid learning functions, managing classroom, co-teach, and many more. You can create your own PD content, conduct fee-paid sessions, and become a workshop facilitator. You can use our free resources present in our library and contribute to it as well. Do follow us on our social media to receive more information and updates. Moving on to the issuance of certificates, we have two types of certificates for this events. First, the certificate of attendance. The certificate of attendance will be issued to them who are attending the live session uninterrupted till the end. Second, the certificate of participation. The workshop will end with a post-session activity given by the workshop facilitator. Once you complete the activity and upload your evidence, you will be eligible for the same. We will be sending you the platform navigation and submission details via email. The feedback form will be sent to the chat box. You need to fill it up in order to receive the certificate of attendance. We take generally 14 working days to issue certificates. Now let me welcome our esteemed workshop facilitator, Ms. Lubna Syed, joining us from Australia. Lubna has been an educator since 2003. She has taught IGCSE, A-Level, NESA, HSC and SATs as well. At present, she is the MYP coordinator at Australian International Academy. She is also an MYP examiner and her subject areas are science and mathematics. Welcome to the session, Ms. Lubna. And yeah, feel free to add something more if you want to add anything to else. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Saheli, and welcome everyone. It's so good to see you all here. I know that I can see from the chat that you're all from different parts of the world, and we have also got some people joining from New Zealand. And I say this because I know it's very late in the night there. So welcome, welcome, and I hope that you will get some benefit out of this session. As Saheli has told you, have taught a variety of curriculums, and I completely understand the difficulties teachers face in not just creating assessments, but also managing assessments in terms of time constraints and how to make the assessment effective. So today, hopefully, I will be able to take you through some strategies that have been beneficial for me in making sure all assessments run well. Now, as you're aware, I will be running the assessment, the task through the Classcipe platform. So please, can I ask? I'm going to share my screen. Please, can I ask you that you join my session on Classcipe so that you can participate in some of the interactives from there. All right. So first of all, a big thank you to Classcipe as well for letting me conduct this workshop. I think the best thing about Classcipe is the interactive element, where it gives the participants the ability to interact with the slides that I'm presenting. So I have used this today, and hopefully you'll be able to see the benefit as well if you're not familiar with that. Today's topic is designing authentic assessments. Now, there are certain keywords that we have. So, first of all, we are going to be looking at what's effective designing. Then we are looking at what makes assessments authentic. And then finally, we look at what are assessments in general. So I'm going to take you through each of these. And I'm going to ask you by the end of the session as well to tell me if you found that we've catered to all the aspects of this. The way the session is going to run is, first of all, I'm going to take you through what is teaching and learning, and what is effective teaching and learning. Then we will delve into formative learning and feedback. From there, we'll go into summatives, and then finally, we'll touch on how to assess work. Now, I have put in used MYP over here, but not necessarily. I have try to make it so that even people from non-MYP background may be able to use it. Okay. Now, before we start, I want to know what you're thinking of of authentic assessment is. So, can you share? This is a text slide, so you should be able to view and type. So, can I please ask you to type three thoughts that you have about authentic assessments, two questions that you have, and one analogy that you have about authentic assessments? I want to see what your thoughts are. So, just go on your screen and you should be able to type on this. All right. So let's see. Yes, definitely it is supposed to be realistic, informative, and transformation. Yeah, measurable and achievable. Knowledge, understanding, self-directed, long-term, absolutely important. It has to be long-term. Okay, a very good question. Why tests are not considered authentic? And hopefully I'll be able to touch a little on that. And tailored, very good terminology, tailored to students, and engaging, definitely. All right, so you guys have a very good understanding of the terminologies that we need to use when we're talking about authentic assessment. Now, if I go back, let's think about it a little bit. Any form of assessment, it will turn authentic only when it is linked to the teaching and learning that is happening in the classroom. So we want the teaching and learning in the classroom to be effective, right? Because let's think back, what is our purpose? Our purpose is to prepare them for a world beyond the classroom. How many of us have gone into workforce or gone into real life and written a test, for example? That's not realistic. That's not how problems and situations arise. That's not the kind of skill set we require, that we are able to answer questions in a short time. In fact, we want, time is not so much a constraint, but you need to be able to critically analyze and come to good solutions. That's a more important skill. So this is where we need to start thinking about, all right, if I'm just preparing them for tests, although tests are important for getting them into university and everything, are they the be all end all? Are they something that we will be encountering in our real life? So this is what we need to start questioning. Okay, and if that's what we are questioning, we need to start thinking how the standards or outcomes that we are teaching them are demonstrated inside class, in school, but also in the real world. So, three very important factors. You want them definitely to still be able to demonstrate the outcomes and understanding within class and within their school context in the form of whatever end of year exams or anything that you have. But you want to also make sure that they are able to demonstrate this through applications in real world. Okay, so what we are doing is we are actually thinking, bringing about a change in the way we are teaching and learning. And a very good example of this is through the IB program model. Now, many of you, if you're not familiar with IB, or if you are familiar with IB, you need to, if you look at the program model, one of the most important things you'll see is that you have all these different subject areas, you have all these different things, but the student is always at the center of it all. And right next to the student is approaches to teaching and approaches to learning. Okay, we're talking about how we are teaching in class, what approaches we are teaching, how they are learning, how are they developing themselves as good lifelong learners. And this is in terms of not just like concepts that we want to teach them, but also in terms of global context. How is it relevant to the outside world? Okay, the next level that you see is actually action and service. So that means, how are they taking this to take action in real life situations? So let's say if you're talking about learning, regarding environment, or learning regarding, creating something out, or designing something, how can they use it to benefit the community? Are there sustainable development goals that they can address? Is there a need of their immediate surrounding that they can address? Are they using their thinking skills to apply that knowledge? So it should become a part of their habit, that whenever we're teaching them, we're prompting them that how does this relate to the real life? Okay, now when we look at these kind of things, that gives us time to start thinking about, all right, let's think about what is the quality teaching that we want to see happen. Okay, what are the elements of quality teaching we expect to see? Now, I'm not going to ask you to add, because I think we are having a bit of a problem with text edits over here. Let's see if we can add in the next slide, but let's look at what are elements of quality teaching, right? Quality teaching is it's actually a big study that was done by Newcastle University on quality teaching, and they developed something called as a quality teaching framework. Okay, now when they developed that framework, they use that framework to not just look at the quality teaching that happens in class, but also look at how you can evaluate teachers for delivering quality teaching and learning in the classroom. Okay, and they have a very good module called Quality Teaching Rounds, which I'm particularly very fascinated by. And they actually put down quality teaching into these three main elements. Okay, they call it intellectual quality. Okay, where you're talking about developing, the higher order thinking skills or the deep knowledge or the conceptual understanding that we always refer to. Um, then they talk about the second element being quality learning environment, okay, giving them opportunities to succeed within the classroom through student direction, through engagement, through setting high expectation, and through having an explicit criteria to ensure authenticity and fairness of the assessment that they're getting. Okay, and most importantly is significance. Now, when you look at significance, I feel that this section here is actually what makes an assessment really, really authentic, right? Definitely, you require these two, but I personally feel this plays a main part. Let's think about it how. We're talking about any quality teaching and learning being significant for the student. So, if let's say they live in India and you're talking to them everything about Australia, okay, how significant is it for them? They would first initially be very attracted to it and wanting to know, but then later on it's going to dwindle off. So we need to make it significant by looking at, okay, where are you coming from? If our student crowd is mainly made up of students from India, then maybe talking about their towns and their backgrounds is much more relevant. We're talking about incorporating cultural knowledge. I'll go back to my example. Let's say if I'm in Australia and if I'm talking about the cultural knowledge about an Indian festival, again, it's not going to be relevant to them. It's not going to be significant to them. So I'm losing my element of quality teaching there by connecting to their own personal cultural knowledge, right? We also need to start thinking about knowledge integration. What is knowledge integration? Knowledge integration is all the students, they when you look at a student, a day in the life of a particular student, they actually learn small things in different classrooms, right? They might have gone from a maths classroom to a science classroom to an arts classroom to a music classroom, and we need to integrate this knowledge, right? As educators, we need to collaborate with the other departments to integrate the knowledge and to link it. And it actually is a very easy job, just looking at maybe the yearly overview that the students get and just thinking, oh, hang on, you know what, they're learning this, then this links to the topic I'm doing, so I can mention it to the students. You remember, you might have learned an aspect of this in your, say, visual arts class, right? So sometime interdisciplinary integrations help with knowledge integration, and it helps in enhancing the understanding of the students. Okay. Next is inclusivity. Inclusivity means that you need to make sure that you are including everyone in the task, right? You're making sure the task is something that is taking into account the different abilities that you have, the differences that you have in the students within the classroom. So it needs to be well differentiated, and obviously connectedness and narrative. So narrative is mean, when you're talking about what language you're using and narration you're using to deliver the task. Okay, so I feel this is where we talk about quality teaching. Why quality teaching? Because you cannot assess what you don't teach. So you have to backward map your assessment, always make sure that you are having quality teaching in class. This quality teaching is based on sound knowledge of the kind of learning environment you want, the kind of intellectual quality that you want to develop, and you're making sure this is significant for the students. And then you're taking it from there to build up towards assessing them in a proper manner. Okay. Now, let's think about this. Okay. If you're talking about quality teaching, then think about your practices as an educator. You're always in the classroom, and I can guarantee, even without having seen this before, you actually might be doing a lot of quality teaching and learning in the classroom. So, can I get you to quickly hop onto the chat and write down what sort of quality teaching and learning you have been doing in the class, right? Like, what is it that you are doing in class that helps with quality teaching? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Just type it in the chat if the text box is not coming up. Wow, I can see play using puppets. That's beautiful. That's a very fun idea, Yildiz. Project-based learning, absolutely. That's also good. I can see that some people are talking about objectives, content, and concept. That generally happens. I'm telling you, your school management is always sitting there making sure you're addressing the content, right? So the content and objectives, they are never right, really a question. You're always addressing that, and that is what you're designing from. But we're talking about the next steps from there. We're talking about taking that and enhancing it into quality teaching, right? Like if I want, I can read off a textbook and I'll still be addressing content, right? But is that more authentic? Is that, do you think students will engage with that? Or do you think like even like, let's say, even us as teachers, right? Like how many of us like pick up a novel or pick up a book, and we know that we have to read it, but sometimes it gets a real drag. As opposed to that, if we're participating in a workshop which is interactive, it's really good, right? Because someone else is summarizing, talking to us about it, working with us about it, right? So that's what we want. Absolutely. Role plays are great as well. So going back, I can see that some of you have really good ideas and really good things. When we are talking about essential elements of day-to-day teaching and learning, we want to make sure that they are, number one, something that is catered to your students, something that is catered to what you want in the classroom, for the students that you have. Okay. Now, obviously, this will mean that you are then taking the role of a teacher from someone who's standing in the front of the class to someone who is engaged with the students in the class, right? So I like to look at this cartoon which says, like, instead of me grading you on this assignment, you can grade yourself, then you can grade yourself and how well you graded yourself, and I'll grade you on that. Okay, what does this mean? That means that you are giving autonomy or ownership to the students. You're making them, you're actually engaging them in the assessment task and saying, look, you know what, you know how well you did it. So reflect on it, right? And I'll reflect on your self reflection so that when you go on later in life with no teacher there, you're able to apply and assess for yourself how well you're doing. Now, these kind of things are what makes assessments authentic. Okay. So, what do you want to do? You want to actually start thinking about your big ideas and your skills. What are your desired results? These desired results will come from the content strands that you want, the overarching aim that you have, whatever you have, right? Then, what you do is after that, you directly jump into the last stage and think about what will be the acceptable evidence at the end of the unit that will help you confidently state that my students have achieved the desired result. So let's say if I want them to be, if the unit requires them to talk about or, learn about forces, right? So if I'm talking about forces, what is my acceptable evidence at the end that will say, okay, you know what, my students know how forces, what forces are, and they can apply it. So I create a task then. And once I've created my task, what I do is I then backward map it to plan the learning events as a lead up to the task, right? So when I'm talking about backward mapping, I will map what factual knowledge they need to know, okay, like the terminologies and all these other things, like concepts that they need to know. I will plan also all the practicals that they need to know. I will also have many formatives in there to test them at different stages. I will teach them also the different skills that they have, and that all leads up to this assessment that I've designed for them. Okay. So, this is how your effective lessons and learning, or effective teaching and learning, are now moving towards your assessment task. Okay. Is everyone okay so far? All good with me? Yep. Thumbs up. All good. Perfect. Okay. So, let's look at what this means then. Okay. So we then start going in, okay, towards looking at your authentic assessment task being in the center. And it is a combination of the factual knowledge, as I said, of the conceptual knowledge and the procedural knowledge that you have. Factual knowledge, as I said, are your key terminologies that you're using. Your conceptual knowledge is the application based concept that you're trying to do, and procedural knowledge is the skills that they need to achieve that, be it in the terms of thinking skills, social skills, communication skills, working scientifically skills, all of that. Okay. And when you look at all of this, the authentic assessment then starts to surface. Okay, because you're talking about combining all these three areas into an authentic assessment. Okay, now when we're talking about all this, does it look like, right? We're talking about different types of formative feedback that needs to happen. Okay, why do we need it? We want to make this formative a part of the learning process. We want to make sure that it is based on objectives that I had decided that I'm going to assess them on, right? So I'm going to assess them, I've decided my assess, and there are certain objectives I want, right? You want to be able to tick them off even before they have gotten to that final stage. Okay, you want it to be an ongoing work. You don't want it to be a one off at the end. That's not very nice. Okay, you need to make sure it's part of your learning process throughout, and you want to make sure that there is regular feedback so that they are learning and improving as they go, right? Your formative assessments are the ones that bring your learning to life in class. If you don't support, let's say, if you've taught a particular concept and we've not formatively assessed them at that point, what happens is, by the time you discover it again, like later on in the summative, it's already too late. We don't have the units continuing. In a most common scenario in the school, what's going to happen is you have your summative assessment and then you've gone on to the next unit, so it's too late by then. You have to build it up. Okay, you will be giving them feedback after the summative as well, but you won't get that proper opportunity to engage in teaching and learning and sort of clarify any misconceptions that they have. Okay, now let's look at how this looks like then. Okay, so if I were to take my content, okay, let's say if I have a media terms that I want to teach them, I want to teach them what is an article, what is a media bias, what are, like all of these things, then what are the learning contexts that I can put it in? I can use surveys, I can use, compare and contrast, I can use discussions of different forms of news and media that are available that will help me understand. So let me delve deeper and show you one such example. So let's say that I'm talking about media, right? I can choose maybe a media website and a magazine, and I can brainstorm or have students compare the two for their effectiveness in delivering the news, whatever they are, right? What will be suited to which audience, which is more engaging, what are the benefits of one over the other. And you'll see that we are then trying to expose them as to when a person wants to, let's say, let's say if I'm selling my house, right? What do I want to do? Like, I have to put it in the news, I have to go out and publish it. Do I make like a video? Would that be beneficial? Or do I go and put it in the paper? Or do you think internet will be better? And this is the application that we start thinking about. Okay, so all sort of formatives then, what I can do is I can start helping them understand a bit more about the way news works and why we have these many different challenges or different, sorry, not challenges, different platforms to know the news, right? We have to make sure we are modeling and deconstructing. So it's not just good enough to compare. We have to then make modeling in class as to how this is creating and deconstruct and break it down. And then we jointly construct it. Okay. So once we've set the context, model and deconstruct and jointly constructed, that's when they are actually ready for the summative, which might be that, oh, you know what, you have to create a news article. Okay, and they will know how it works because we've taken them through the different steps needed. Okay, moving on to the next one. Let's think about formative, right? So if you're talking about formative learning, let's delve deeper. So I've given you one example. You tell me, how does formative look like in your classroom, right? What does formative, what do you see when you're seeing a formative? What do you hear when you're talking about formative? And what does it feel like? Like, what do you think the students feel? Okay, can you type up your responses for me? I can see all the wonderful comments from everyone. Absolutely. Can I please ask everyone to engage with it and write down your comments? Yes, absolutely. You can feel students' level of understanding, feel their empowerment, yes, and feel their progress. Absolutely. So we're all on the right track, guys. Like, that's why formative is important. We want to see and hear. We want to see them engage. I really love this comment message by Surekha Katare. We want to see them engaged. We want to hear them ask questions to dig deeper, and we want to feel them get a good conceptual understanding of what they're talking about. Absolutely. And sometimes, like as the primary curriculum coordinator is saying, it can be very eye opening, but it's also a very good method to see where your students are at and to help you develop your next methods, right? So moving on, let's see what is the purpose. Like, so when you're talking about a student wanting to apply communications more effectively, let's say, we must organize and depict the information logically. Like, we want to see, depending, so if our purpose is that, you know, the students need to demonstrate this communication skill strand, for example, right? So what happens in classroom? You will have the teacher model, let's say, a short chemical reaction in a laboratory, and following that, students are working together to create a flow chart on how the steps were working. You know, what were the steps that they took to organize that. Now, after they have done that, if I'm focusing on communication skills of the students, I can ask them to pair up as a formative and discuss what might happen if we were to move around the steps, right? If we were to, let's say, shift one of the steps from top to bottom, right? Like, instead of, you know, standardizing the, let's say, you know, like if the prac is, let's say, about boiling water, what if we put in the water after we started heating the empty beaker? What would happen, right? And they might come up like, look, you know, that's not safe because the water is going to splutter as soon as it goes. Or, you know, when you're adding cold water to the hot beaker, the beaker might crack if it's glass. And this is where you actually see them applying very simple lateral thinking and logical thinking to come up with solutions. And this is how they will encounter it in real life, right? Like, when they go in, let's say later on they are doing something and they need to heat up things, they'll say that, okay, you know what, I needed to fill up my container before putting. And, you know, sometimes it becomes a part of what they are as well. We building habits that they will stay with them for a long time. Now, these formative learning experiences that we're talking about, there are many different terminologies associated, and, you know, like, there are many different types of it. So if you're looking at formal or, you know, like formative, where formative feedback is like, you can have it formal or informal, you can have it as a formative, like, you know, we are talking about all these different topics or ways we can run it, right? Types of assessment. So you can have formative assessments, you can have summative assessments, you can have continuous assessments or terminal, end of time assessments. You can have examinations, you can have courseworks, which are like portfolios. You can have them process oriented or product oriented, and you can have them internal or external. Now, these are all different types of assessments that we have, right? Formatives typically lead up to these, right? They can also be process oriented or product oriented, but they have multiple checkpoints within them. Okay, so when we're looking at assessments, we need to start thinking, okay, what am I, why am I assessing? And many of you might have attended the search a session by Curtis Beeford, who is another presenter in this round of PDs through Classcipe, and you might have started the understanding what is assessment for learning, of learning, and as learning. So it's very important that as educators, we look at what is the purpose of our assessment, and based on our purpose of our assessment, we decide the strategy that we are going to apply in class. Okay. Now, I like to look at this sort of method, right? So I need to start thinking, okay, what am I using it for? I started off here today. So if I'm looking at enhancing the teaching and learning in the classroom, and if I'm looking at using it for delivering quality teaching, then my formatives are going to come in more handy because they are meant to inform me. They inform me about where my students are at and what my next session or next step should be. If I'm looking at improving the curriculum and teaching, many of you looking at, okay, you know what, I really need to drill in this content stand, or I need to really improve my teaching. Again, your formative is more important there. But as we go into monitoring and management to look at where the students are at and to monitor the growth in terms of their understanding, we are sort of coming to that gray area in between the formative and summative, right? Because we are then starting to increase the independence as we are going here. So students are getting more and more independent as they are coming to this. So when you're looking at your final summative, you're actually standard setting and holding them accountable. So you're actually wanting the students to be accountable for what they have learned throughout. So you've probably then gone through all these stages and come to this aspect of it. Why is this important? Because this is what gets fed back to your school managers and your school heads, and they then decide what's happening. But we need to understand that if we've not done all these stages, then this is not going to happen, or it's not going to be very successful. Okay. So let's look at what do we do next. First of all, we make sure that for every formative assessment that we're giving, we are giving effective feedback. This effective feedback helps them understand that the classroom learning that's happening is happening in a non judgmental atmosphere. What this does is it helps students then step out of their comfort zone. Think about it. You want them to attempt an authentic, real world, complex assessment, right? You're talking about a complex, real life scenario that you're going to give them. Now, that complex scenario is going to be unknown to them. It's going to be an unknown territory. It's going to be very linked to real life. And that's what they're going to go, right? And experience when they go in real life. It can be very unsettling. So, you want them to feel very comfortable and confident in that, and the tone for that is set through the feedback that you've given throughout your teaching and learning. Let's say if a student makes a mistake, and if I've taken the top down approach and said, oh, how could you do that, I've repeated it so many times, then what the students will then do is they will be very scared to apply the feedback, apply a context, or their learning the next time. They are going to feel very threatened. They're going to feel that, oh, what if I make a mistake, the teacher's going to be upset with me, right? Rather than that, we should start taking the approach, okay, you know what, all right, you tried it, did this work, why do you think it didn't work? So we are asking and giving them feedback through question prompts or through positive suggestive language, which is building up towards constructive solution to where they are at. Okay. I don't know if many of you are familiar, but this man here, he is the guru in feedback, and like effective feedback. His name is Dylan Williams, and he always says, talk to your students, ask them how you're using the feedback I'm giving, right? All of us teachers feel that we give the most effective feedback in class, but sometimes it's interesting to see from a student's perspective, right? If you ask them what kind of a feedback you're giving, and if they don't give you the answer, a good answer to your question, that means they probably are not aware, right? Like, I remember going into class once and I said, oh my god, I've not marked your books for the longest time. And the students say, but miss, you've always been talking to us about our exercise book work. And that tells me, like, that in that moment I realized that, oh, you know what, so that means my conversations in my class had gone up, and the students already were noticing that. And that's what you want. You want them to prompt you what your teaching is, right? So then I became more conscious about my conversations, obviously, but I could also use it to my advantage. So it informed my practice within the classroom. Okay. Now, obviously, when we are looking at all of this, we're talking about this formative cycle. So you're collecting evidence, okay, based on what they're saying to you. You're analyzing this evidence. So, like, okay, thinking back, all right, this is what they're saying, what's happening over here. You're feeding it back to the students. So if they're making any mistakes or anything, you're analyzing it, feeding it back to the statement. Then you're adjusting your teaching in the classroom to cater to that, to respond to the feedback that you've given to the student and what you've collected as evidence. Once you've adjusted, you actually teach it and then collect the evidence again. So this cycle that happens on a day-to-day basis within your classroom is what is governed by formative assessment, right? Your formative assessment are the ones that will help you guide it. I've already taken you through this, so I'm going to skip to the next one. Now, when you look at formative, obviously, again, you want to think about the dimensions of learning that are happening, right? So for that, what I look at is three things. Okay, I look at feeding up. So where am I going? What do I intend? Where do I intend to go? Okay. Then I look at how am I going. So like, where did we, how much did the student grasp from it? And then feed forward. Okay, this is where I am at the moment. What am I going to do next? Right? So these are three checkpoints that will help you decide the formative assessment to feed back into your teaching, right? So feed up, feedback, feed forward. These are the three things I want you to take away. And remember that effective feedback dimension for a formative assessment is very, very important. Now, as I said, we've done all of this. Why are we doing this? You might say that, oh, the session is about authentic assessments. Why are we looking at that? Because all of this, when it's fed into the summative, that's what makes the summative very authentic. As I said, you can only assess what you've taught, and you have to teach it well. You have to check it up to make sure that the students have grasped it. You have to give them constructive, ongoing feedback as a build up to it. And then, when you're confident that they are at that stage where they are ready to independently do it, that's when your summative comes in. Okay. This summative has a completely different, purpose than your formative. This summative, you are making judgment. Okay, it's less for feedback, and more for making judgment of their level of achievement. You are going to get a grade, give them a grade, and you're not going to give them feedback, you're going to report on it. There's a very distinct difference, right? Feedback is when you're giving them ongoing feedback for improvement, and you're working with them in the classroom for improvement, right? But here you're reporting on it. You're actually telling them that when the student, we finished this unit, and when they left my class at the end of this unit, this is where they were at. So this is more for the next level teacher, or for the next year, or for the next unit teacher to know what you're going to use it for. Okay. So this is something that we need to recognize and appreciate. Now, this brings us to the main crux of our PD today. So then we need to start thinking about our summative assessment and start thinking about, okay, now what do we do? Now, when you're designing your summative assessment, there are a couple of things that you need to look at. Okay, you need to think about whether your summative assessment is linked to your big ideas that you had for the unit, right? Remember how when I showed you the initial 3-step design, you decided on the big ideas, you decided on the summatives there, and then you decided the teaching and learning activities, right? So over here, you're going to first ask yourself, when you have your summative task, you're going to first ask yourself, is it linked to my content? Is it linked to my big ideas, right? Then you start thinking about your objectives that come from the local state curricula that you're following. Okay, what did what did you have to address? What was the objective that was stated in there? Okay, once you've done that, you then start thinking about how we can create a meaningful performance out of it. So okay, I wanted to teach them, let's say, the concept of media, okay, and different types of media. If I was to then think about, okay, have to address the strands of writing a newsletter, writing a media article, critically analyzing a media article, okay, how can I create a meaningful real life task for it? Okay, so okay, I can put them forward as a journalist, and I can tell them, create a media report for this unit that we learned in the classroom, okay, or for an event that we had in the school. You are the journalist, you have to write a media article for it. You can choose whichever type of media article you can. We've studied so many different types of media articles. You can choose. You can have a video, you can have an internet ad, or you can have like a written article. It's up to you, okay? But before I give it to them, I also think about what will be the evidence of learning in there. Okay. How can we collect it? So if the student is putting together all these different types of media, what will be my evidence of learning? How we can collect it? And how does it demonstrate the conceptual understanding behind it, right? So I will need to add certain prompts in there to make sure that the conceptual understanding is demonstrated. Otherwise, as I said, for students to make a media report, like it was, they could make it even before the unit started, right? Even a student in year 2, year 3, thanks to show and tell in kindergarten, can actually speak about anything, right? So we want them to show the higher order, your appropriate conceptual understanding. So we'll need to make sure our task is suited to that. And we need to start thinking about how it is recorded and analyzed, right? Because when the whole class submits it, or when you get the whole thing, you need to make sure that there is evidence for you to give feedback and for you to communicate that feedback effectively for the for reporting purposes. Okay, so these are some steps that I use for designing my authentic summative assessment, right? We need to think about also, what strategies do I have, right? I could have classroom observations as they are making the assessments. I could have tests and quizzes embedded within it. I can have, like, I can also, like, let's say when you say tests and quizzes, they could have the media article, but then they can have questions in the form of a quiz after. Why did you choose this over the other? What's the benefit of using it? And this helps you tick off those authentic problems, right? You can have like performance tasks, so you can ask them to demonstrate it within the class, or you can have a proposed solution as well, right? Like, okay, I've done this, but in future this is what I want to do. So these are some strategies that you can use for it, right? We can also have things like process journals, so they can, that's another way of getting them to demonstrate their conceptual and understanding, like, have a portfolio, or like evidence that they've done research before they prepared it. So you can have all of these as well, that will help you cater to this part, right? These three questions here, because these three questions are often lost when we are actually doing an authentic assessment in class, right? This The answer, if there is the answer to these three, that's what will make the task more authentic. What happens after that is, once you've designed, it's very important that we standardize the task. Now, many people have a misconception about standardization. Standardization is not moderation. Okay, standardization is, before you give the task out to the students, you sit down in your group of teachers with your heads or anything, and you look at the task, right? And then you ask yourself those prompt questions that I asked, and say, okay, Will this task give the students the opportunity to demonstrate a high level, right? So if I have this task, how will my students be able to demonstrate that full achievement level of whatever I have set for them? Okay, and is there a rubric I can give them, or a success criteria that I can give them to show and indicate that this is what you need to do? We're doing this for two reasons. One, it helps us check that the task is authentic. But second, it also helps us amongst teachers to get a consistent understanding of the expectations of the task, right? You might have this one high achieving student in the class who probably does exceptional. So then does that become a 7 and 8? What about that student who's really done well based on what you've taught in class, right? So your final mark should not be because you have that high achieving student in the class. It should be what you have taught them as the highest achievement level, right? And how they have taken that a little above and beyond. What that does is makes it fair for the students, right? Because otherwise, as I said, you might have one student who maybe has a parent who's a news reader or a news reporter. Then what? It becomes unfair to the others because that student then has that unfair advantage, right? You want to use that, but you want to reward it and you want to recognize it, but you don't want it to be unfair to the others. So you need to first decide, even before the students have achieved, attempted the task or received the task, what a high level task would look like in a typical for a typical student in that class. You can also look at what a low, what a medium will look like. And you need to communicate that as you're giving out the task to the students. Okay. So then we start looking at, all right, what background information do I have about it? Okay, this is what I'm teaching. We've analyzed different types of artwork, and following this, students are making their own, let's say, composition or a comparative essay of 800 words, right? So if I'm giving this background information, okay, I come up with a rubric for it, and I have looked at my final achievement of what that rubric says. And then based on that, when I say demonstration of excellent acquisition and development of skills, I'll look at, okay, I've taught these four skills in the classroom. When the students demonstrate all these four skills, that's when I say it's excellent. Or if they only demonstrate three out of the four, that's what I mean by substantial. So what you're doing is you're then catering and interpreting the rubric based on the teaching and learning that's happening in the class. So this is the standardization aspect that we need to work on and look at. Okay, and when we've done that, we then go into creating your task. So this task that you create can follow the grasp template. Many of you might be aware of the grasp template already. So what does grasp look like? There are different elements of it. There is the goal, the role, the audience, the situation, the product, and perform and standard. And this is just like a template to not so much create the task, but to make sure that all elements of the task have been communicated, right? These are questions that will come up in the students. For any student to attempt any assessment, they need to know what the goal is. What are they trying to do? They need to know what their role is and who the audience is. And they need to know what the situation that they are under in demonstrating it, and what kind of product performance or purpose of doing this task is, and what is the success criteria for it or the standards for it. So here there are two things. You can either have the success criteria and or have the standards. The standards come from your national curricula, whatever you're teaching. Okay, is everyone okay with this? Does everyone get what I'm talking over here? Perfect. So the reason why I ask is because this is the main part that will help us design our task. And this is your takeaway thing that I'm going to have you do as well. So let's look at one example of this. Okay. Now, in this, what I have is I have a task, and this is a math task, and it is a Viva task. Okay, a Viva Voce task or a Viva task, where I've told them, okay, you know what? Let's say you go on, you get inspired by the teacher that you have, i.e., me in the classroom, and you decide to become a teacher. and the topic that you're teaching is measurements, okay, and you're becoming expert in teaching this topic that we've been studying. You fell in love with this topic, okay. So let's say you have to become a teacher and present and think of your teacher as a student, and you have to explain the topic that you have covered, okay. So you need to make sure, because you're a teacher now, you're an expert, right? You're teaching your teacher, so you need to make sure that you're using the proper language, you're coming to the right solution. But hang on, there is a thing. I'm going to give you the question during the task, so you need to study beforehand, and you need to explain the steps like how I explain it in the class. And you need to answer all my questions just like I answer all your questions in class. Now, you might think, okay, hang on, isn't this a test? Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's a test. But it is a test done in a real world scenario, linked to a real world a job, a job that someone does, a job who the person who does it was once a student as well. Maybe that's how they got inspired to becoming a teacher, right? So you're linking your content into a real life context there, okay. And trust me when I tell you, you will be surprised. We have done this task before. This is actually a task from my school, and I remember the student actually, because they had to choose right out of all these, they had actually come up with interactives for each of these. So they had come up where they had found this sort of tool or interactive that they could demonstrate and use that as explanation. And really, as a teacher, I had never come across that. Some of them were using even GeoGebra, which I did use in the classroom at that point. But it was good to see them connect and use it from as a teacher, right? They had taken that role very seriously. So this is what you want for them. You want to see how it is linked in the classroom. Now, instead of a teacher, I could have also said, okay, you know what? You're an architect, right? You have been commissioned, given this small space, and told to make like a house or design something that uses the space most effectively, right? So you need to do some measurements and tell me why it is most effective, right? Think about what perimeter it is, think about what's the area of it, and think about how you are using the area in terms of dividing it into different spaces, and coming up with this, maybe a tiny house, for example, right? uh, and think about why this is living versus this. All right, let's take the next step up. What is the ratio of people per area, because that's also important. You can't have more than certain number of people in a given amount of space. Certain countries ban that. So as an architect, you need to think about that, right? What if I put like 5 beds in a small room? Would you go and stay in that? No, because it's going to be claustrophobic. There are too many people like in a very small space. So this is where you're connecting your task, which is a simple mathematics based task, into the real world actual profession, right? Like, for example, I could give you another thing. Let's say this, you have been given, this is the space, and it's a cruise ship, and you need to design rooms in the cruise ship, which are of varying sizes, to make sure that there are a lot of people, but at the same time it's not too tiny, because otherwise they'll turn into prison cells. So what are you going to do? How are you going to separate out your cruise ship? You want to have different areas within it. You want to have a dining room, you want to have a games room, you want to have the actual sleeping rooms, but you also want to have like a theater for performances. So this is where you're connecting, and for all of this, what you need to do is, they will need to do calculations, right? Maybe even model it, maybe even make it, right? Make a model for it and calculate the areas of the different rooms, right? So that's again something that you can cater to. All right, is everyone okay? Do you have any questions? I'm going to quickly take a break here and answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and I'm going to just take questions. So if you have any questions, please ask now. All right, if you have any questions, maybe raise your hand, and that way you can ask me, and we can
Lubna,
unmute.
There was a question from Tim. He had asked what is the difference between goals and purpose, because in GRASP you have that goal. And you had that purpose also. See, he wanted to know what is the difference between goal and purpose.
So goal and purpose, the goal is actually what you're trying to get them to do. Okay, so let's say if I go back to my measurements topic, my goal is to demonstrate they have to demonstrate their understanding of the topic, of measurements, right? That's my goal. But what is the purpose? The goal is to help them understand and create like a tiny house, right? But the purpose behind this, because I want to know how well they can decide the area, how well they can understand measurements. Now goals and performances, as I said, can be interchangeable as well. Sometimes people like to have the product there and the goal on top. And a classic example, I'm going to share some more examples in a minute, which will help you understand it. So I'll just go back and share my screen and take you through that example, so you can understand it. So let me just, are you able to see my screen? All right. So let's say if I'm talking about goal, so you are required to create a stop motion animation. This is a design task that I have using a series of digital images in one of the groups of 4. Okay. But if I look at the purpose here, the purpose is it's actually asking them to go through the design cycle and making sure that they are
तुमचा
choosing,
फोन डिस्कनेक्ट नको करा प्लीज.
the
मी तुमचं ते
purpose
यूज
is,
करलोय.
I'm sorry, please can I ask whoever is unmuted to mute yourself? All right, thank you. Sorry, the purpose is actually over here to follow the design cycle and also use the appropriate software and hardware, and to show considerations about, what sort of lighting you're using, sound you're using, color you're using, and all these different elements of a good design, right? So my purpose here is for the students to demonstrate the elements of good design, but the goal, how they're demonstrating it, is through creating a stop motion animation. So I hope this helps. I have a couple of more, like examples. I'll take you through them, but I hope you've understood, Tim. Okay, so a question is, why are we talking about formative learning, and can we have summative learning as well? Look, you know what? Formative learning is actually learning that happens within the classroom, to inform the towards the assessment, right? So you're forming learning, formative learning. So you might have formative tests, and then when you get the feedback from the formative tasks that you have formative learning, which is derived from them. Summative learning actually doesn't happen, because after summative is directly reporting. You might have a tiny bit, like where you get an opportunity, let's say, you have maybe 1 or 2 lessons, but technically after the summative there is not much learning that can happen. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, that formative learning is a much more broader term. Okay, all right. Any other questions, guys? All right, so I'm gonna move on. Let's say, so y'all can still see my screen. So I'm gonna go back a few slides actually. So we're going to back. So we had looked at this task, and the next step after that is what makes it authentic. So I've given you a task. What makes it authentic is that, number one, it resembles real world. And what it means is that when you're doing this authentic task, it is more meaningful and appropriate and significant for others, right? But it's also giving students the opportunity to demonstrate their mastery, to demonstrate what they have grasped through the learning that has happened throughout the unit. Now, when you're talking about this, definitely it has many benefits, because number one, you're exposing them to real world complex scenarios. Number two, you're highlighting why it is very meaningful for them, why it is very unique to them. You're also helping them bring their own skills as subject matter experts, right? You're telling them to demonstrate, to go above and beyond what you have taught, and to show their talent. Can they enhance it based on learnings that they've maybe had in another classroom, right? And what you're doing is giving them ownership and making sure that they are work ready. A classic example of this, guys, is when we had recently everyone went into lockdown, and you saw that everyone had to adapt. Teachers had to adapt, students had to adapt, and you quickly realized that all that e-learning, and we had all these questions before, why computers, and suddenly in a flash we realized why computers, why e-learning, when is it needed. And think about it, all of us were able to adapt because as teachers we've done this in class before. Imagine if you were in a school that you had not done not used internet in the class or not had devices. That's when things got very complicated and very hard. And thankfully now that we are out of COVID, that's what teachers are aiming for. You're actually aiming for real world unpredicted uncertain scenarios that they are. I've heard this multiple times, and I'm sure you guys as teachers have as well heard it multiple times, that you are like the world that we live in at the moment is evolving very fast, right? So that means all these students that are sitting, the jobs that we are exposing them to, the jobs that they get exposed to later on are going to be completely different, right? We don't even know, they don't even exist at the moment. Like when we went through school, we didn't have all these other jobs that are existing now, right? IT was there, but it was very different. Like I know that I was in, maybe, and this gives away my age a little bit, but I was in year 9 or 10 when computers first made an appearance in the classroom setup. And we were so fascinated because the school had one computer, right? And this is, I'm talking like a very high end school, right? It's only like by the time we went from that to 10 years later, we suddenly had a computer lab in all the classrooms, right? And when we studied, like to think that, oh, we'll be able to access internet to get the answers, the internet itself would take a lesson to connect. So think about all the changes that have happened from when you were studying to now, and that's the change that our students are going to face as well. Albeit at a much higher rate, right? So we have to prepare them for that. They have to be confident in the jobs that exist now to be able to apply it to later life. Okay. So this is where I answer your question as to why not test. And I know that many people had asked this at the start. Why not traditional assessments and why authentic assessments? Because the traditional assessment, yes, it's going to make it very easy for you to measure the students' content knowledge, but an authentic assessment will help you understand not just their knowledge of content, but also their ability to apply that knowledge, right? Um, you're giving them in a traditional, you're giving them like proficiency, pencil pen answers. But when you're talking about authentic, you're talking about performance, right? A combination of just content knowledge but along with skills and personalization, right? And while the traditional one will only look at recall and cognitive ability, you're talking about authentic being able to use thinking skills and higher order thinking skills to actually construct their own meaning, right? To give you those out of the box solutions, right? You want more of that. You want people to go beyond the scope of traditional things, because let's face it, if we keep doing what we are doing, we are not going to evolve. We are only going to stay where we are, right? If your student is not able to take the context that you've taught them and enhance it or bring it new meaning or bring it new solutions, the world, they won't be able to cope because people are going to race ahead. So that's one of the reasons why we want to think about more authentic world, to give them that edge, right? If you're talking about jobs these days, asking about portfolios and are requiring people to have, okay, so show me a portfolio of your work. How many of us are teaching them how to curate their own portfolios in high school? So this is what we need to start thinking, right? It's okay to expect, like, let's say if you were a business manager, if you're employing a teacher, let's say you're all like doing interviews and employing a teacher, what skills do you expect to see them? Okay. And then stop and ask yourself, are you teaching that to students who might possibly take up that profession in the future? So that's the mentality that we need to start getting into, and that's what makes our assessments more authentic and more real world. Okay. I'll give you this example. As I said, this is the example that I was showing you about design. When you're talking about making stop motion animation, right? You need to tell them that, when will you use that? You are an animation designer. You are making an animation for your classmates, and that's why you've been commissioned by the school to create it. And the theme that the school has decided is friendship. Like you need to think about friendship and talk about making an animation for the students, right? So then students can get into groups, do your different Gantt charts, think about, okay, how they're going to present. This gives them the opportunity to push their thinking, push their knowledge, and come up with solutions, right? I'll give you another example, and this time I want you to tell me why this is an authentic task, right? All right. So think about this task. I've given you the grasps for it. Tell me whether this task is authentic or not. Can you just type your responses in? Yes, there is a role. Obviously, there's learner agency. Absolutely, guys. So, what happens is if you look at this task, you're talking them to become an author and submit like a magazine story, right, for their fellow middle schoolers. And you're talking to them about the middle schoolers' identity and a problem that the middle schoolers are facing. Now, think about it. The middle school is a very important part of their life, right? That's where most of the identity crisis happen. That's where they have this fitting in, like they have a problem with that. So when they are doing this task, number one, it is a real life task that is there. But think about the purpose. It's actually a very good task for them to appreciate and understand that the problems that they are facing are also problems faced by everyone else as well, right? They can relate to their own issue. It gives them the opportunity to communicate what's they're going. And I can, like, we can always link this to the job of, say, storytellers, right? Like you're talking about, Harry Potter like kind of story here. They can write that. They can actually express themselves and give you possible solutions that you can implement as a teacher. So not only does this become an English task, but this also helps another bigger idea and purpose. So this is what authentic assessment is. It serves multiple purposes and it is very connected to the students. If I give this to a student, even if it is not a summative, the students would love to do it because it's talking about them, right? It's talking about giving them that creative opportunity to demonstrate. So it is quite beneficial. Now, moving on, if I'm looking at authentic tasks, like we need to think about when it is highly authentic, whereas low authentic, right? So when you're talking about your tests and everything, that becomes low. Even a negotiated assessment, a negotiated test will be low. But when you start bringing case studies in, and when you start thinking about industry and e-portfolios and work placements, that's when you're talking about getting them work ready. So we have this very good assessment time continuum of activity where you might have, I'm not saying that this gets disqualified, you do have some of this, but you also want some from this end, which is role play simulation, informal work experience, work placements, and stuff like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, this is where I'm going to actually, we've had a lot of talking, we have the last 10 minutes. I'm going to ask Saheli, if she's there, to put you all into mini breakout rooms. And what I want you to do is, in your breakout room, guys, I want you to start thinking about creating your own authentic task. So think about a topic that one of you is teaching, and I want you to use the grasp to create your own authentic task. Okay, think about what how you want to do it, and this is your opportunity, because this is what I want you to submit later as well. This is your opportunity to clarify any doubts that you have about that. So Saheli, is it possible to put them into breakout rooms, please?
Yeah, yeah. It will be open in a few seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just adding them to the breakout room.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing, guys, because you all already have the grasp. So think about what this, and there is on that Classcipe page, it's a multimedia page, so you can submit it through there as well. Okay, but after, I'm going to give you, say, 5 minutes, if that's okay, to work on your grasp task.
Shailendra, do you have a question to ask? I can see that you're raising your hand.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Shailender. How are you?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
Good, thank you.
Ma'am, I'm teaching me MIP
Yeah.
Can I tell my graphs method how I'm using that methods?
Absolutely. This is applicable to any subject area. And what I want you to do is, because Shailendra, after this session, what's going to happen is you all are going to submit your tasks for feedback. So what I want you to do is I want you to use this time in your breakout room groups to discuss it and work on that. If all of you all are from different subject areas, maybe make for one collectively. I think, we are all quite confident. See which everyone, like if everyone in your group is, let's say, from, I'm sure as a PDHP teacher or as a sport teacher, you work very closely with biology as well, so you can have something like that, or English, you can pair with them and make it. So think about your task, and
Okay,
then
ma'am.
I can discuss it.
Okay,
Okay,
okay. Thank you so much.
no
Okay,
worries.
Miss Lubna, I've created the room. I'm just opening all the room. They will be in their breakout room in a few seconds. Yeah.
Okay, so can I please ask everyone to join breakout rooms? Maybe can we like have like not more than like maybe 7 or 8 or whatever, yeah.
I've created 10. I have put
Oh,
almost 4 to 5 in
yeah,
one
yeah,
room.
perfect.
Yeah.
10 is also, yeah, that 10 is also, yeah, perfect. It gets clarified what we understand and what we don't understand, right? So one of the participants in the group, or one of the breakout room groups, have asked me feedback. So the task that they have created, it's in the chat. It is designing a thermometer task. So I thought like it's best to give feedback to them in the presence of everyone. And thank you so much, Shishti, for being a sport to accept feedback in front of everyone, because that way they'll understand, and everyone will get a good understanding for it. So let's say if I'm reading this task, the task is to design a thermometer, and they are obviously scientists, so that's good. They are, working in a real life science situation, and they work for an XYZ company. And the situation is, they've given is specific range and sensitivity. Now when you look at situation, you need to give a better situation. A situation is a context, right, where they are working. When you say specific range or sensitivity, in terms of a student's understanding, they might not get it, right? So you will say that, okay, you know what, a lot of thermometers have come out in the market, and for the XYZ company to be on the top, they need to make a thermometer which is suited for like, like people, because who are getting low temperatures these days, or their body temperature keeps dropping below standard because they live in this extremely cold condition. And so they want. So now what I've done is I've created a situation. So I've given them the specific range that we want the thermometer to work on. Okay. And we need it to be accurate, but we also need it to be rugged, right? So that they can take it, let's say if they're going out and keeping it with them, right? So this is
Yes.
where you're making the situation more specific, right? In terms of the product, yes, the product is the thermometer, absolutely right. But the standard, what is the standard? You need to think about the standards more in terms of your context. You're a science teacher, right? So you're what are you asking them to make the thermometer using, right? Is it materials, different types of metals, different types of non-metals? What are they going to use, so you need to start thinking, like, even for me, if I were to make a thermometer today, I'll get confused, because mercury, what are you going to use? Are you talking about using sensors? Because that's going to be a whole different thing to using chemicals, right? You can use either or. So
Yes,
you need to start thinking a bit more specific here. I don't want you to narrow it down, but I want you to be explicit about your expectations from them. Do you understand?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It
So
should be
this
more
is what
descriptive and
That's right. So the description of the task comes under the situation. The situation gives them the context of why they are making it. The why is the one that always sells, right? Why do I need to make a thermometer? I don't want it. I don't use a thermometer, they might say. They say, no, no, no. You started going on these treks, and everyone around you says that when you go on this trek, people you get hypothermia, and you might fall sick, but you're trekking, you're out in the open. You need to make sure that the thermometer doesn't break, but you also need to make sure that it's giving you the temperature. If your body temperature is falling below a certain thing, it sends out an alarm or something when you've worn it. And what you've told them is, look, you know what, this is very similar to the Apple Watch, which will send out warning when you have high blood pressure, or your heart rate
yeah,
changes. So you're making it from a thermometer perspective, right? So see how you're bringing more and more real into it. So that's what we want to do. Now, thank you for everyone else as well that you've submitted the task. As I said, please do submit it, because this is what I'll give you feedback on, just like I gave feedback right now, and I'll type it up and send it up for you. But remember, like when you're looking at creating authentic tasks, always think about whether you're confident that your class will be able to do it. You don't want them completely lost, okay? And that's what, and you want them to, want it to be challenging enough as well, okay? Now I'm going to ask all of you to send me a reflection as well. This brings us to the end of our session. There was one small thing that I want to go over before we finish up and wrap up and think about feedback, and that is the benefits and challenges that you will face when you're doing authentic assessment. Definitely, you're talking about long-term retention. Like if a student makes a thermometer, trust me, even when they are in uni or later on in life, they will say, oh, when I was in school, I'd made my own thermometer. So you're talking about retention, you're talking about engagement, but you're also talking about teamwork and transferable skills, right? But having said that, as good as it sounds, you need to think that it is definitely going to be unfamiliar. So you need to prepare them with prerequisite knowledge. Otherwise, they are going to feel very unprepared, right? So teach what you intend to assess. It is going to be time consuming, but you will find the benefits of it, okay? It does require a lot of commitment from the teacher, and you need to make sure that it's varying in its relevance and applicability. And one thing I always tell students, teachers is, let's say if I'm taking the same thermometer task, if I've put in all the work, when I'm using it the following years and I want to change it, I just need to change the thermometer to maybe a pressure sensor, or to a clock, or to something else. The rest remains the same and it will still be. So the first time that you create it, the authentic task, you can use it multiple times and each time it will look different. So this difficult part that you're doing is not wasted after 1 year or 2 years of usage, right? It's got its long-term benefit. So that brings us to the end of our session. So please, can I request that you give me feedback, what you found, what you're confident about after the session, what you found challenging, or if you have any questions still. Okay, and I really would like to thank all of you for the engagement that you've given me, for the for your conversations in the breakout room, really beneficial. So please, if you can type your feedback in over here.
Thank you, Ms. Lubna, for the detailed and informative session. I was paying so much attention to your session. I could connect to your, GRASS model because I have done that. But yeah, it was so good. Thank you so much. I know it is very late for you over there. It's almost, I think, past 11, right? But yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah,
staying
it's
on.
about 11:15, 11:20 now. Yes.
11:15. Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us today. The feedback form is shared in the chat box. Fill it up in order to receive the certificate of attendance. And as I mentioned earlier, that you need to complete the activity and submit in order to receive the certificate of participation. Also, our next session is on 21st of January at 11 a.m. IST on 21st Century Skills. And the speaker is Ms. Gurpreet Kaur. She is the chair of MYP Schools Indonesia. Do join us. And yeah, if you have anything to ask, you can please, you can feel free to ask. We would love to have your
Absolutely.
questions.
Anytime you can
We can
ask
have
me anytime.
another 5 minutes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then we'll wrap up.
And as I said, before I go, I'm going to ask you this question. My session outline was that I'll take you through the process of designing authentic assessments using the GRASS model. I'm going to show you assessment samples from various subjects, and we'll curate our own assessment. So I hope that I've fulfilled my session guidelines. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now. Yes, I can see that. Ishita, you have a question?
Thank you so much, Lubna. Thank you so much for an informative session. Thank you.
Most welcome, Vigya. Most welcome.
Yes, Miss Ishita.
Yeah. I have a question. Like, you have been asked to submit us our assessments. Where do we submit? Should we send it through email, or we share an email ID for the feedback? Like, I discussed with my team when we in the breakout rooms, but we haven't been able to pen it down. Okay, we had a discussion.
That's fine. Maybe Saheli, can you tell them how to
Yes.
submit it, please?
Yes. So after the session, we will be sending you the platform navigation details. We will mail all the participants about it, how to submit the task. You have to submit the task in the Classcipe platform only, because Miss Lubna will leave the session ongoing mode. So anytime you want to come back to the session, you want to check the resources, it will be available to you. Okay,
Okay,
so
thank you
we
so
will
much.
be sending you the
Sorry.
details, how to enter to the session, how to upload your materials, everything you will get by end of tomorrow. We are having back-to-back sessions, so we
I
just need
understand.
a day to
Okay.
plan everything and send it to you. But promise you will get it, yeah, by tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lubna. It was really, really nice. And I missed yesterday's session. How can I make it for like I mean, you
Okay,
also
yeah, his recording is available on our YouTube channel, because we live stream it, so the recording is there.
Okay.
You can check. Yeah, do subscribe our channel, Ishita.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it
Thank
definitely.
you.
Chishti, yes.
Just
Yeah,
okay,
I
yeah.
had question about that only, how to submit the task, but my query has been resolved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So maybe Renuka?
Yeah, Ms. Rubna, thank you so much for your informative. Really, I liked it. The same question I thought of asking. We have discussed in the breakout room what we were planning, and we didn't write it. So I thought, where to put this? I got clarity. And one more thing, on 21st, how to join this seminars or these workshops? Ma'am is telling 21st, 11 a.m. IST. So will we
Yes,
get
yes.
any link like that so that we can join this workshop?
Yes, the workshops are there already in our Classcipe library. I'll just share the link in the chat box. Yeah, just allow me a moment.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Any other queries regarding the workshop task?
Do
Anything?
you have any app regarding this? I mean, the Classcipe app is there, or only the website is there?
Only the website, ma'am.
Okay, so you'll be mailing that the whatever submission is to be done through the
Sure.
mail, right?
Yes.
Okay,
And
thank
we will
you.
tell you
Thank you.
how you can upload it to the Classcipe platform.
Yes, yesterday
Okay.
I attended a session and you told us that you'll, Mr. Curtis, and you told us that you will send an email for submission. I followed the email and tried to create my own task to submit it, but still I have 3 tasks that cannot be submitted. I did
Yes.
the poster, I did everything. I don't know how to submit it. Is there
Yes,
any
I
email
already told you that I'll be
Yeah.
guiding you
Yeah,
after
I'm
the
here.
session. So I just request you to stay back for 2 more minutes once we
Sure.
wrap up, and then I
Sure.
will address your query.
Thank you
Okay,
so
please?
much.
No problem. Yeah.
I
Yes.
thought you're going to submit the detail, email the details.
Yes, Miss Jyoti, we will email you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I was just saying that I have shared the YouTube link as well as the library link in the chat. Please see that you are filling the feedback form so that you get the certificate of attendance before you leave.
Any other questions? Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Lubna.
Lubna.
Good night.
Thank you, Sadhu.
Thank you, Lubna,
Good night.
and good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lubna.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.